everyone. Welcome to Locating Benchmarks Preserving Heritage, the lunch event. My name is Kat Porter and I'm the project lead. Along with Margaret O'Sullivan, who is the research assistant for the project, we're both absolutely delighted that you could join us this lunchtime, not only to hear about the project itself, but also how you can get involved, I hope, in the project too. And we'd both also like to extend our thanks to Glucksman Library at the University of Limerick for facilitating this event today and helping us share that across social media and things. We're going to, in that time, introduce you, first of all, to the project itself and talk a little bit about what benchmarks are, how to find them, etc. Bearing in mind, I'm sure that many of you who are attending today will know a lot about them already. We're going to speak a little bit about why we feel there's a need for this research as well, particularly in a heritage context, and explain how you can get involved in helping save heritage in County Limerick in particular, but more broadly across Ireland as well. And that arguably links with what is the most important element, I suppose, of the project, and that is the community engagement, which Margaret is going to speak about later on in this session today, because the reality is that a project like this just doesn't work without that community engagement and community interest. So the project itself is funded by the Heritage Council through what's called their Heritage Stewardship Fund. Some of you may have held one of those awards previously as well. And it's co-funded by the Faculty of Arts, Humanities and Social Sciences at the University of Limerick. And it's a short-term project, so it's only sort of 6-7 months long or so, running sort of in the middle of 2025. And as I said, I'm acting as the project lead there and Margaret O'Sullivan as the research assistant. But we have many, many more people involved through our project partners who are supporting us. I'll mention each person by name here as well. Some of them could be here today, unfortunately some couldn't. But Tom O'Neill, who is the Heritage Officer for Limerick City and County Council. Lisa Griffith, who's the Director of the Digital Repository of Ireland, and I'll mention their role in the project today as well. Ellen Murphy and Tom Lonergan from Tulsa Erin. Ellen is the Archives Manager and Tom a Senior Archives Officer specific to surveying. Sinead Keogh from the Glucksman Library, Paul O'Brien from Mary Immaculate College, Limerick, and Jared McCarthy from Maynooth University. And in addition to that, I would say too that since the project was first mentioned on social media and in other forms of media back in May, we've had an awful lot of interest from the general public, which is really great to see so early on in the process, and particularly so because up until now we haven't had anything really to show people in terms of how they could get involved in the project as well. So the main aim of the project then briefly is really, I suppose, to address what has become a growing concern regarding awareness, recognition and protection of Ordnance Survey benchmarks from a cultural heritage perspective. And I suppose the idea for the project really came from a personal perspective and experience. So some of you here today might already be avid benchmark hunters, or you might know someone who is. There are certainly quite a few hobbyists across Ireland and in Great Britain who do so. Or maybe you're an engineer or a surveyor who has actually used benchmarks in practice in your work. But certainly from my own perspective, I've been searching for benchmarks recreationally for a long time now, and what quickly became apparent, and more so actually in recent years, is that they're disappearing. And while there are many people who have an interest in finding benchmarks, there has been no one project yet across these islands that has actually moved to consider how we might address their loss. And also investigate the causes of this alongside that, and actively do something about thinking about how we might protect those that remain going forward. And so linked with that main aim there in terms of growing awareness, recognition, protection, etc., we have several project objectives. Some of which actually we've already completed as part of the build of the website and the app. But the first of these involves, I suppose, making people more aware of what benchmarks are. Many people do already know what they are, but there are many people who don't and have never heard of them. And we really want to raise some awareness of them as heritage assets, core to Ireland's cultural landscape. And importantly too, and I'll mention this a little bit later as well, to engage with them as a form of contested heritage as well, given the US origins in military history as well. And we also aim to harness community interest and engage communities in locating and photographing the benchmarks across urban and rural situations. So this is, in essence, a co-creation exercise between us and the communities of County Limerick as well. And we're aiming to do this via a variety of different aspects of digital technologies. For instance, all of the benchmarks that are shown on the historic maps have already been digitised by the project using GIS. That's for County Limerick only, I should say. So this digital layer includes all of the benchmarks that are displayed on the two available historic map layers, so the 25-inch and the last edition maps that many of us will be very familiar with. And we've also now built an interactive mobile application and an associated website where people can learn more about benchmarks, but also record benchmark locations in situation and give us and provide us with photographic evidence of those as well. That I'll talk a little bit more and give you access to those towards the end of the presentation today. Also, data collected via the mobile application will be ingested into the Digital Repository of Ireland, DRI, and that is really the arm of the project that wants to ensure the future sustainability of the data. So all of the attributes, including their location, their state, the photographic evidence as objects, then will be imported into the repository, and it will make sure that outside of this very short funding time frame that information is kept safely. It'll also create for us a 21st century record of what are currently extant and what we're calling lost benchmarks in County Limerick, and hopefully help drive a conversation around the protection of them as heritage assets. And fifthly, the project will foster new conversations between communities, but also academics, stakeholders, the heritage industry around that preservation and protection. And we're hoping to also make recommendations on the same as well in terms of related policy. Part of this will involve the use of this County Limerick project because, of course, the spatial extent of this is County Limerick only at this stage, but we're using it, or the data derived from it, as a proxy to actually calculate the current loss of this form of heritage across the island. So that's really important there in terms of an objective and moving forward. And lastly, the project, as I said, focuses solely on County Limerick as a pilot project, but the view here is to expand it across the island at a later date. Now, as I said, I'm sure many of you are here today because you already know a lot about Ordnance Survey benchmarks and maybe do some benchmark hunting yourself. But for those of you who aren't familiar, I just wanted to give a little bit of context to them. It all began, I suppose, in April of 1837. And here, during what was called low water spring tide, a height measurement was taken at Poolbeg Lighthouse in Dublin Bay. And this reference point, or fundamental reference point, was called the Irish Ordnance Datum. Now, it was later superseded in the early 1970s by mean sea level in Donegal. But as part of this initial exercise between 1839 and 1843, the Ordnance Survey first placed benchmarks into Ireland's landscape. And this was part of an exercise to accurately measure height across the island for the very first time. It was known as the principal lines of spirit levelling. And this was largely conducted along road networks with branch lines then siphoning off into more rural towns, into villages, countryside, etc. as time went on. But continuing through to the mid to late 20th century, actually right through to the 1990s, benchmarks were cut into the landscape. And according to the 2 editions of the historic maps that we have available to us here in Ireland through Tulsa Éireann, there are over 5,000 unique benchmarks cut into structures, walls, bridges, gateposts in County Limerick alone. So there are many, many thousands more across the island as a whole. Now, the process of measuring height across the island can be seen here at Poolbeg. Of course, this is not to scale. I don't want to get the engineers annoyed. It's purely for illustration purposes. But you can see here the 2 benchmarks on this extract from the 25-inch map highlighted here with the orange circle. So these are the places where we have the cut marks in the stone and where measurements were taken. And then between those, you can also see intervening spot heights that were used to measure height between these points of reference. And the height here was measured in imperial feet and marked on the map, beginning with the Poolbeg measurement of 20.9 feet, imperial feet, and moving west here on this map to 21 feet above sea level at the 3 intermediate spot heights before the second benchmark, which was measured at 20.2 feet. So each spot height, the surveyors were measuring foresight and backsight in a manner similar to that diagram that you can see at the bottom of the screen. And surveyors used a cold chisel then to carve a horizontal line, typically somewhere around 1 to 2 feet above ground level, although we do see different heights depending on where they were cut into vertical surfaces, but also on horizontal faces as well, such as quays, for instance, where they're relatively common. And an angle iron was then inserted into the cut mark to form a bench upon which the levelling rod was placed and observation and height taken relative to a nearby spot height. Alternatively, a finger-size hole might have been cut instead, and occasionally it was fitted with a rivet or a bolt where the equipment would be rested, in other words. And then after measuring the point, they added the broad arrow to its base, or what is actually an inverted fion, which would be used in practice then later to find and identify the height point by any future surveyor. Now, there are, of course, many other forms of benchmarks, which I'll mention again shortly, but these are the main ones that we typically see across County Limerick. Now, benchmarks don't appear on the first edition Ordnance Survey maps, but on later map editions, the sites of benchmarks were indicated with a little crow's foot sign and also the text with the height in feet. Sometimes, although it's more common in the northern counties, you would also get some descriptive remarks in relation to the location as well. But typically they're found in what were deemed permanent stone-built structures. So bridges, churches, town halls, also placed on gateposts, walls across urban and rural environments, and largely along road networks and also some waterways as well. Now, as I said, the most common type is the cut benchmark, which you can see an example of here from County Limerick. This is by our colleague Liz Gabbett when she was out doing some testing of the app for us. And you can see too how this image relates to the map as well, which we've also circled there, the benchmark of the crow's foot on the 25-inch map as well. Now, the benchmark locations can be found on the 25-inch and the last edition OSI maps, but the occurrence and the location does differ between both maps because, of course, we're seeing development occurring in terms of the built environment, change over time. Sometimes when a benchmark that had been placed earlier couldn't be found by a surveyor later on, they would cut a fresh benchmark, or also there was re-levelling that occurred at different times as well. And just to give you an idea of this, here's an example from Limerick city centre. These are the benchmarks, first of all, as shown on the 25-inch historic map. And you can see those marked in red. I think we've got 4 of them there. But if we flick on in time to the last edition maps, you can see that there are many more. This time they're marked actually in blue. And in fact, if we move through to modern imagery today and combine the benchmarks that are on both of those historic maps, you can see that there really are quite a lot of them within this sort of urban context, within this urban environment. Note too, though, the differing locations between the historic maps as more benchmarks were cut. As I said, sometimes others were removed or replaced over time, and equally, it can be quite challenging sometimes to actually reference a historic map with a modern map. So there's a little bit of shift sometimes between the locations there as well. So for instance, on this, that's why one of them appears to be in the water. It's not actually in the water. It's just that there's a little bit of a divergence in terms of the historic map and the modern map lining up. And these are some examples of the County Limerick benchmarks that we've found so far when we've been out testing the mobile application. You'll note that so far here, we have only found cut benchmarks in County Limerick. But of course, many other forms do exist, as I mentioned earlier. Flush brackets. This example is actually from Northern Ireland, where they're much more common. They were employed more so after partition by Ordnance Survey Northern Ireland. In Ireland, you're most likely to find them on trig points, such as the example here from Howth. Others, as I mentioned, are found on horizontal surfaces, so quays, doorways, windowsills, etc. Sometimes including that bolt or the rivet that I mentioned to the top of the broad arrow instead of that more typical horizontal line cut. But we'd be really interested to hear from anyone who finds or knows of one in County Limerick that isn't that standard typical cut mark. But unfortunately, this is often what you're faced with when you go looking for a benchmark. Here we have 3 examples of incredibly weathered BMs, so they're in poor condition, barely visible, and this is due to erosion of the stone. So the context in terms of the material in which the benchmark was actually cut matters here in terms of its longevity. Some of these could be 190 years old, for instance. So we're thinking about that change over time in the weathering of the stone itself. Buildings and structures obviously have been demolished and or redeveloped, and the benchmark along with them. These are 3 examples just from Limerick city centre, one of them even related to the University of Limerick there as well. And modernisation also has caused loss, even just in recent times. If you look at the example just to the bottom right of the screen here as well, we're actually standing on the edge of a road on a bridge, and this concrete plinth has been installed at the base of the bridge. But what has happened there is that because of that, it has actually raised the ground level and obscured the benchmark behind it. Many have also been destroyed due to home boundary renovations as well. Typically something like a new wall, a fence, maybe hedge has been added, and that original rural stone wall that was previously in place has been removed and used elsewhere instead. Many benchmarks have been rendered over as well due to renovation works. Typically, we see this on gateposts, again, sort of boundary walls of properties, but along roadsides as well. We would see it on agricultural buildings, cottages, etc. too. And in the most rural parts, the greatest culprit to loss is not actually human intervention at all, but it's nature itself. In some cases, you can even see parts of the original wall along roadsides. But what has really happened here is that the benchmark itself and the wall have been almost completely subsumed, or indeed completely lost to the growth of that hedge around the wall. And I think this really got us thinking a little bit more too about how our landscape has changed over the last 200 years. These were boundary walls to fields and to property, and being subsumed by nature in this way So much so, I think that many of us are maybe even unaware that a wall was ever present or is still present, hidden within that hedgerow as well. So what we read, I suppose, as Ireland's rural landscape today looked quite different 190 years ago, and it's a reminder of that. So in these cases, the benchmark is probably still there, but it has been, as we are categorizing it, lost to nature. And we've managed to find a couple of rural roadside examples just to show you what the walls would have looked like. And there actually aren't that many still exposed in this way. But here there's one from Maru, actually, and another from Askeaton, both in County Limerick. And they're quite nice examples too, because seeing these two alongside one another also show you the difference in dimension. So they should be roughly 4 to 6 inches in diameter, but these are quite different in size and style as well, which is something that we're interested to investigate more too. We've also come across what could be or appears to be attempts to erase benchmarks from stonework, though these could also be examples of where benchmarks were being cancelled from service as well. And as with some of the other rarer examples, we'd be really interested in hearing from anyone who discovers something like this as well. And we've even had some modern interpretations as we've been on our hunt as well in testing the app. One here on Render, where we're on a gatepost. The benchmark was present on that gatepost, but when the person rendered it, then they drew it in themselves in the render on top. The second one is a rather dubious attempt at a replacement. I'm not quite sure what was happening there. And the third one is actually an example of rescue and repurpose. So this was a property where the boundary wall at the front was being removed and rebuilt. And the people who lived in that property actually took the stone and they've placed it into their garden. It was important to them that it survived that process. So why do we need this project then? Well, OS benchmarks, they're tangible connections to our past. They tell a story of curiosity, of scientific progress, not just in Ireland, but also beyond Ireland as well. And of course, as historical artefacts, they are linked directly with that first Ordnance Survey of Ireland. So when they were going out to do or to begin that levelling process, that was just towards the end of the surveys that were taking place in relation to the first Ordnance Survey maps that we're so familiar with. But due to the involvement of the British military here, which of course led the OS in its beginnings, these I suppose, tangible relics of the survey are also considered contested heritage. And those inverted fions that are marked in the landscape could, for instance, be viewed as exhibitions of authority, of ownership, as the military did use the same symbol for this purpose in other ways. So, for instance, stamping it on equipment and things like that. So this really opens up, I suppose, new questions around what heritage means to us and what we constitute as our own heritage in Ireland. And at the same time, benchmarks are undoubtedly examples of what was extraordinary rigorous engineering, and it mapped the shape of Ireland's landscape. They were instrumental to planners, to engineers in the construction process, but today they still offer crucial insight into the topography across the island and height measurement. So, for instance, they hold a lot of value in terms of helping us to assess how landscape and climate have changed over time. And that's particularly true of those benchmarks that are cut on coastlines or along the coast that can actually be used today to investigate sea level change, for instance. And though benchmarks are these living documents to Ireland's landscape history, they do not have protected status in Ireland. And as a result of that, just as the examples I've shown you, many have been lost over time. Demolition, alteration to the built environment, erosion, environmental change, etc. Lots and lots of reasons there. The number of these marks which were placed into the landscape is actually unknown. Nor indeed is it known how many remain. And that actually makes it very difficult for us to calculate their loss in terms of heritage. In Great Britain, they have a much better record. It sits at approximately 500,000, I believe, benchmarks across the 3 countries. For Ordnance Survey Northern Ireland, they have digitised where the benchmarks are for those counties, but the level of loss is unknown. But for the rest of Ireland, we just don't know. And that's the reality. So it really is paramount that some new conversations are opened up here around the protection and preservation of this form of heritage where it is completely lost. So through the project then, as I said, we've already identified and digitised the location of where we know benchmarks were cut in County Limerick. So in essence, every point that you can see on the screen here is where there's a crow's foot marked on one or both of the historic maps that I showed you earlier. And the reason that we've done this is, number one, because it makes it a lot easier for everyone to find the benchmarks when they're using the app, and I'll show you how that links with that shortly. But secondly, it's important to us in terms of calculating the loss as well, because we don't want to just find out about those that still exist, those that are extant, but we also want to show evidence of those that have been destroyed. And that's really, really key to opening up and furthering any conversations into the future. But as you can see from this map, this is a really, really big task. There are thousands of these in County Limerick. And we need your help with this, frankly, and that community involvement as well. So the collection app itself can now be accessed through the browser. You can scan the QR code at the top of the screen to go directly into the app, or you can scan the one at the bottom of the screen to go into the project website. You can use the collection app via any digital device, so mobile phone, tablet, laptop, desktop computer, anything that has an internet connection. There is no need to register, no username, no password. You don't need to download anything. Because it works in the browser, really, it's that simplicity, I think, that helps with this. So there's no complication in terms of having to download anything and try to understand how to do that across different platforms, etc. It's all browser based. Now, this is an example of when you first open the app on your mobile phone. Some of you might have already done that. You'll be presented with this collection screen. And the very first task here is one that requires you to mark the location of the benchmark on a map. So you'll actually be asked to share your location with the app. I should add, we don't get that sort of information directly, so don't be concerned about that. It's not live in that sense. But what that will do is that actually the app will zoom to where you are at that point in time. And if you're out and about in the field, and you're searching for a benchmark, that will give you a better idea of where you are in relation to the points on the map where there should be a benchmark located. You don't need to do that though. You don't need to share your location. You can select don't allow if you prefer. If you're particularly confident in your geography or trying to test yourself perhaps as well, just like any digital map, you can pan, zoom, search for the location, etc. that you might wish to record. And you fully open the map screen then just by clicking on the map itself. That will then expand it to the full size of your device screen. And what you'll notice straight away here, so we're in the centre at Matthew Bridge of Limerick City, you'll see that digitised point layer that I mentioned. So every one of those little broad arrows that you can see there in orange is the location of where the historic maps tell us a benchmark was actually cut at one time or other. Now, of course, remember that doesn't mean that it's definitely present in reality today, but it is a location to visit, in other words. Now, in the map screen itself, there are a few different options for you as well. You can toggle, for instance, between a variety of different base maps. So there's a modern map, 2 historic maps and a satellite map for you to choose from. There are other base map layers that are part of the software that we're using, but they don't have the actual point layer in relation to the benchmarks added to it. The satellite map in particular actually is particularly useful in rural contexts. because it allows you to see where field boundaries are, and that can actually be very helpful as a guide if you're in that rural context where there's not really anything else in terms of a landmark to guide you. So you need to then, in the app, drop a point on the map at the location where you found the benchmark, or not if you didn't find it, because we still want to record those locations as well. And then to save it, you simply click OK up in the top right, and that will close that map interface. And then you scroll down to the next part to upload the images that relate to what you have found. Now, you're permitted to upload a maximum of 2 photographs. You have a couple of choices in how you wish to do that. You can either do it directly from the app, in which case I think for most mobile phones, for instance, it won't then save the photo to your camera roll, but you can also choose to just take a photo as you would normally with your mobile phone and then upload it instead. And when you find a benchmark, this is an example of what we want to see. So a close-up of the benchmark itself, but then also an image of its situation in the landscape too. So that gives us behind the scenes a better picture of what you were looking at and where you were looking. And when a benchmark is not found, which is really common as well, all we want from that is just one sort of wider shot of the situation itself. So showing where it probably was located, you know, to your best guess, in other words, before it was maybe destroyed or removed. And then you just scroll down through a few very simple multiple choice questions on the condition, the type and the location of the benchmark. Now, we've been really, really careful here. There were so many things we would like to know, even, you know, things like the height and dimensions and things like that. But we're not being over complicated here or off-putting. We've really just kept it to the basics. So it is just the condition, the type and the structure that you've been surveying there. You can also choose to enter your initials if you wish to do that, but it's really important that you don't include any kind of personal or identifying information into the app. And then it's simply a case of pressing submit and it will go to us behind the scenes in the database. And once you've submitted your find, it'll undergo, first of all, quality checking. We need to check in particular photographs, and it will later appear on the benchmark map, which you can see an example of here on the screen. Now, on the website at the moment, we just have finds categorised according to found and not found. At this point, we have some basic statistics in there as well. For instance, how many visits have there been to benchmark sites and things like that. But as we progress and we get more data in there, we're going to add some additional statistics as well. But one of the beauties of this is that if you click on any of those points, you'll actually be able to view the photographs that other people have uploaded there as well. So you could choose then maybe to go and visit it yourself if it's a really interesting one or something like that. So, Margaret, I think if I hand over to you now to chat a little bit about the community engagement side.
Hi, thanks, Kat. Hi, I'm looking after the community engagement section of the project, and I suppose it is very important that we engage with the community at large throughout County Limerick. To date, we have put out a press release on the UL website, which got quite good traction throughout the country. And that was picked up by the Limerick Post newspaper. So they did an article on the project back about 3 weeks ago. And also simultaneously at that, we set up a Facebook page, which has been growing in traction and getting more and more hits over the last 3 weeks that we have put it out. We have discovered that quite a significant number of community groups and heritage groups are quite active on Facebook, as opposed to other social media channels. So it's a way of trying to disseminate and engage communities throughout County Limerick with the project and to get information out to them. And also, just to acknowledge our partners, Táilteann Éireann and the DRI and the library in UL, because they have been sharing information about the project through their contacts and their social media channels. So that's all part of getting the information out there. And if you would like to go on, our Facebook page is Locating Benchmarks, Preserving Heritage. If you gave us a like and a share, that would be great. It would help to get the information out. throughout the county and more broadly throughout the country as well. So how we're going to engage in the future, I've quite a lot of logos. So the first thing is the Irish Farmers Journal have an article coming out next week on the project. I just got word of that earlier today. And RTE Brainstorm, they have agreed to publish an article hopefully within the next couple of weeks, but we will be promoting that through our social media channels. So again, if you wouldn't mind sharing that, it would be great. Limerick 95 and other radio stations, particularly in some of the border counties surrounding County Limerick, because radio doesn't just stay within the county, it crosses county bounds. So we're hoping to start a series of radio interviews from next week onwards, just to get information and engage with people who might not read the local press. But we're hoping that other newspapers will pick up on the project and try and get it out. Our partners have all agreed to share information through their social media channels, and the Public Participation Network in County Limerick, they have quite a reach as well, particularly through community groups such as the Tidy Towns committees, men's sheds and other groups. So they're going to disseminate information about our project. We do have a series of community engagement meetings planned for the month of August with our partners in the Limerick Library Service. We have to agree dates yet with them and the locations and the times, but we will be advertising those within the next couple of weeks and hoping to build traction. At those meetings, a bit like today, we'll try and give the history of the project, how benchmarks came to be, how the measurements were taken, and let people use the app. Most of the libraries are located in urban areas, so there's usually a benchmark or two within walking distance, so we can try and we can show people how to use the app, and they can head out themselves and have a go at using it. And if they have any questions, they can come back in and we can try and sort them out while we're there. So hopefully we will have a good geographical reach throughout the county, and as I say, we will be advertising the dates and times of those meetings as soon as they become available. If there's any community groups that want us to go out and meet with them on a one-to-one basis, we are willing and available to do that. If the elected members in Limerick City and County Council want us to come and present about the project at any of their meetings, we're available to do that as well. And likewise with any urban and rural planners and consultants, particularly those maybe that deal with projects in rural areas. As Kat said, an awful lot of the projects, the benchmarks in rural areas seem to be disappearing. People opening gaps to build a house in a fence, or farmers putting up a new shed. So it would be good to even preserve those benchmarks in situ or on the site in general. Any professional bodies that would like us to present to them, we're available, and student groups. And as I said, on the 23rd of August next in the People's Park in Limerick, as part of our Heritage Week project, we are going to have an event starting at 1 p.m. where we will again give information about the project and show people how to use the app. But our colleagues in Táilteann Éireann are going to join us and give a live demonstration on how benchmarks were used for levelling. So that's quite exciting that they are going to come down and join us. And information about that event can be found on heritageweek.ie. It's already up there and available. So after that, we have anybody who has any other suggestions on what we can do to engage with community, we're more than willing to meet with you. The one thing we would like, which I suppose has come out of discussions with Kat during the week, is that if anybody has stories that they're willing to email in to us about memories of people doing some levelling in their areas and their experiences. I happened to come across, when I was doing my own research during the week, about how the military surveyors upset the people of Nina dramatically because they carried out surveying on a Sunday back in 1882. So if there's, it was a cross-community upset. It wasn't just limited to any one community. So if anybody comes across any of those stories, we would love if they could share them with us. And because it all builds to the knowledge that we have, and it also gives the experience of people on the ground, not just the relics that are left afterwards at the time. So we have there's a page on our website for frequently asked questions. So if anybody doesn't know how to use the app, we do have a short guide on the website to explain how they can use it. What if somebody has already recorded the benchmark? We would love loads and loads of photographs of benchmarks, because we can learn so much from looking at them in at different times of the day, different light conditions, and different weather conditions. So they gave us I suppose, a record of things, how they evolve over time and change over time. Like Kath has said, the loss is also important, that we record whether benchmarks have been lost or not. I know certainly in my own locality, when I went looking, most of the benchmarks have been lost, and most of them that are recorded are on public buildings. So it'd be great. It's important to record the loss as well. We can also you can also upload benchmarks from other counties. The benchmarks won't be on the layer, they won't be highlighted on the layer, but they will be recorded. So if you do find something in another town that's not in, please feel free to upload it. And the benchmark you don't have to use the app, you can use the website. Some people are more comfortable using a website, so you can log into our website and use the website to record the benchmarks that you find or don't find, as the case may be. And when will my benchmarks appear on the website? Well, we aim to check all the photographs and have them uploaded within 48 hours. Obviously, sometimes depending on the volume of work, that may take a little bit longer, but within 48 hours, we're hoping that of submission, that we're hoping we have them uploaded to the website. So that is my bit. So this is the access to the website and the access to the app. And we also have an email address below, which is benchmarksireland@gmail.com. So if anybody has any queries and they want to contact us, we will be monitoring the email, and you can send us an email there. So thank you. And if anybody has any questions that Kath and myself can help with, please feel free to ask us or put it in the chat.